A classic line that many people wisely say sometimes is, "Never meet your heroes." While that may feel a bit pessimistic, it comes from a place of both honesty and heartbreak. You see, in certain fields of entertainment, whether it be sports, music, or the wonders of Hollywood, we look up to people who inspire us, move us, or thrill us with what they do in their profession. To our minds, they are the best things in the world, and we want nothing more than to meet them. Then, when we do meet them, they are, at times, not as kind, loving, caring, or even happy as they are when they're in their professions. And when it comes to the golden age of Hollywood, there were some actors who were downright evil, and we'll show you some examples of that. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. 7. Kirk Douglas. We'll start out by going with a rather famous name, not only because of his own exploits in Hollywood, but because his son, Michael Douglas, had an equally famous career that spanned decades. Given the respect that Michael Douglas has in the Hollywood community and the various roles he's done over the years, you'd likely think that the apple didn't fall far from the tree and that Kirk Douglas would be one of the most upstanding men in his era of Hollywood. Alas, that's not actually the case. In fact, even Kirk Douglas himself admitted that he was one of the most unpopular men in all of Hollywood due to his antics on and off set. For example, one of his most famous movie roles was that of Spartacus, which has one of the most famous scenes in all of cinema via "I Am Spartacus." However, what you might not realize is that just 1 month into the production, Douglas straight up fired the director, and that wasn't the only film that he tried to control with an iron fist. But his nature goes far beyond that. He wasn't the kindest person to his co-stars, and he gained a reputation for that. Just as important was that he was known for his infidelity, and one infamous tale even had him going after a 15-year-old young starlet named Natalie Wood, and making it clear that if she spoke out on what happened, he'd ruin her career. While that story was unverified, it was admitted by Douglas that he did have affairs, and given the state of old Hollywood at that period of time, it's hardly the most unlikely of stories. 6. Mickey Rooney. There are some actors who had such a wide range of skills and a love of cinema that they would appear in all kinds of movies and productions over the years. When it came to Mickey Rooney, he was one such guy. He did movies well into the later years of his life and even appeared on a Disney Channel original movie via Phantom of the Megaplex, not to mention was in multiple stop-motion films as Santa Claus, including in the Frosty the Snowman productions. Yet when it came to how Mickey Rooney acted on set, he was anything but the nice, cheerful man he often portrayed. He was known for being incredibly rude, dismissive, and taking advantage of many who were in his orbit. That included one of the most famous actors of all time in Elizabeth Taylor. They were in a film together called National Velvet, and he apparently took advantage of her and then claimed to not know her afterward. One could argue that many of these traits led to the many other struggles that Rooney had in his life, including many unsuccessful marriages, drug issues, and having many financial woes. It also didn't help that he was a man who helped others lean into certain cultural stereotypes about other races, including his infamous portrayal of an Asian man in Breakfast at Tiffany's, a role that critics adored, but the Asian community loathes to this day. 5. Faye Dunaway. Oh, you thought we're just going to point out how evil men were in the golden age of Hollywood? Come now. We all know that women can be just as evil as men when the situation is right. And in old Hollywood, the situation was almost always right, as there was a constant struggle for certain women to not just get the spotlight, but keep it and keep others out of it. Enter Faye Dunaway, one of the most prolific female actors of her time, and still one of the most stunning actors to come across the screen. And yet, if you were to get on her bad side while filming, you would be in serious trouble. Faye was known for being volatile in the worst of ways, and never being afraid to get violent when the situation called for it. Just as important, it wasn't just her co-stars she was getting violent with, but those who were there to merely help the production work, like costume designers and assistants. In one movie scene, she was supposed to fake a slap on her co-star, but did it for real. Another time during a Broadway play, she got angry over a small appearance snafu and slapped someone for it. One of her co-stars once noted that when he had libbed a line to make a scene flow better, she threw something at him. The phrase hostile work environment may not be what you think when you picture Faye Dunaway, and yet that was her reputation off-screen. 4th, Orson Welles. We now go to a man who is often revered as a true genius of the golden age of Hollywood. Orson Welles is the man behind Citizen Kane, which many still feel is the greatest film ever produced. He would also do classic films like 1984, and even voiced Unicron in the first Transformers animated film. Believe it, So, why was this man truly evil? Well, you can easily point it to the fact that he didn't play well with others. In recorded tapes that were released after his death, Orson Welles full-on went off on just about every Hollywood mainstay of the time period, including Charlie Chaplin, James Stewart, Bette Davis, and so much more. He didn't hold back and pointed out every single flaw he personally felt he saw in them. He even felt that Marilyn Monroe wouldn't do anything in Hollywood. That combative attitude would hurt him in more ways than one, as while he was a genius in front of and behind the camera as a director, he didn't like the way the studio system worked in Hollywood. Case in point, Citizen Kane is heralded as a masterpiece, but it was intentionally sabotaged by those outside the production to ensure it didn't get awards, newspaper mentions, and so on, ensuring that the film didn't make any money. It was only because of international praise and support that the movie was able to reclaim its place in history. Oh, and if you want to know what it was like when Welles wasn't fully invested in a project, look up his French champagne commercial and its outtakes. It'll give you a laugh for sure. 3. Errol Flynn. Next we have another classic actor who apparently didn't mind taking part in some risky business. Errol Flynn was born in Australia, and even from a young age he was known as someone who didn't mind pushing his luck and trying to do things of questionable legality. That led to him getting kicked out of school, doing diamond smuggling and pearl diving, and more. Eventually he made his way to England, where he would get the spotlight he felt he deserved, and that eventually brought him to the United States, where Warner Bros. Made him a star. Yet, like many others on this list, his dark side would shine through in spite of his fame, with his more evil acts being the various accounts of him assaulting women in various ways. He went to court for these acts and was acquitted of them. However, given the state of both Hollywood and the world at that time, acquitted doesn't really mean the same as innocent, and the rumors continued long after the verdict was handed down. We may never know the full truth about the Prince of Thieves, but his star definitely is dimmer than he would have liked it to be. 2. Milton Berle. While we've shown you some absolute A-tier talent on this list so far, you could argue that of all the ones we've talked about so far, Milton Berle had one of the biggest impacts on Hollywood as a whole. This was a comedian and actor who knew how to work the camera and get the laugh, and that led to enormous success. He had a self-titled TV show that was so popular that people were literally glued to their television sets and didn't want to miss a single minute of it. Don't believe us? There were periods of the show's fame where businesses would actually shut down versus having to miss out on the Milton Berle show. That's the level of importance that he had, and so you have to wonder, where did it all go wrong? Ironically, via another classic comedy show, Saturday Night Live. He was invited to be a host on one of the episodes, and even with the show's creator, Lorne Michaels, against it, the hosting went on as scheduled, but not as planned. From the moment that Berle came onto the set and started performing, he tried to make it all about him and not about the cast he was with. The entire show was a disaster, and that acted as a catalyst for all sorts of stories about Milton Berle and how he demanded that everything be about him, even when it wasn't supposed to be that way. It just goes to show you that sometimes even the ones you think are untouchable are something else entirely when no one is looking. 1. Bing Crosby. If you want to discuss true classic characters in the golden age of Hollywood, you need look no further than Bing Crosby. His legacy is one that is so grand that you likely still partake in it today via hearing songs like White Christmas. He was a man with an incredible voice and looks that made him an A-list movie star in no time flat. Yet, much like certain celebrities that would follow him, his family life was anything but standard or healthy. For example, due to his immense workload, he barely spent time with them. Even his own son noted that he was barely present at times due to his schedule. Another thing that hurt him, though not necessarily in an evil way, is that he wanted them to have nothing to do with Hollywood, likely because he experienced many other people going dark with the spotlight on them. But by doing that in a way that wasn't truly expressive of his own feelings, he just put a huge strain on their overall relationship. In truth, arguably the greatest evil that Bing had was that he couldn't truly tell people how he felt, and that led to battles with alcoholism. It was even said that just before he died, he played a round of golf and he was more focused on the golf game he was having than his own health and well-being. Sometimes the greatest evil is the acts we do to ourselves, but what's perhaps even more disturbing and worth discussing is how these patterns of toxicity and harmful behavior were often not only ignored, but outright enabled by the system surrounding these stars. Because in the golden age of Hollywood, image was everything, and the studios were more than willing to sweep scandals, abuse, or even criminal acts under the rug if it meant their biggest moneymakers could keep cashing checks and packing theaters. Back then, the studios didn't just manage careers, they controlled entire lives. Actors were under strict, long-term contracts that dictated where they went, who they were seen with, and what public statements they could make. If a scandal was brewing, it wasn't uncommon for studio fixers to jump into action, paying off victims, silencing the press, or manufacturing a completely false narrative to protect their investment. It was damage control, decades before PR had a formal name. This also meant that many of the stories of abuse and evil behavior that we now know about didn't come to light until decades later. Victims were silenced, intimidated, or simply ignored. Co-stars and colleagues were pressured to look the other way or risk their own careers. And in many cases, the perpetrators didn't just walk free, they were celebrated. They were put on more magazine covers, offered more leading roles, and handed awards with standing ovations. There's something chilling about that level of systemic protection. How the very institutions that were supposed to create art and inspire generations were also complicit in shielding predators and bullies. It sends a message, especially to younger generations, that fame and talent are somehow enough to excuse cruelty. That genius means never having to say you're sorry. And unfortunately, these attitudes weren't limited to just the stars at the top. The culture of abuse ran deep throughout the entire ecosystem of Hollywood. Assistant directors, makeup artists, costume designers, and even extras were often treated like second-class citizens, if not worse. For every A-list actor who threw tantrums or assaulted colleagues, there were dozens of crew members who paid the price, quietly enduring verbal abuse, exploitation, and unsafe working conditions just to stay employed. The truth is, when power is unchecked, it tends to rot. And in Golden Age Hollywood, power wasn't just unchecked, it was glorified. These actors were more than celebrities. They were gods of the silver screen. And like many gods throughout myth and history, they often used their power for personal indulgence, not the greater good. It also didn't help that the press of the time was part of the problem. Tabloids and magazines operated more like fan clubs than watchdogs. They glamorized the stars' lives, painting them as flawless icons even when they knew better. Editors struck deals with publicists to bury negative stories in exchange for exclusive access to glowing interviews. Photographers were instructed to capture only the best angles, and gossip columnists were more interested in who was dating whom than who was hurting whom. But as time marched on, the truth had a way of rising to the surface. Memoirs, biographies, investigative journalism, and the sheer bravery of survivors have helped unearth the darker stories that Hollywood tried to hide. We've come to see these legends not as flawless idols, but as deeply flawed people, some of whom did irreparable harm behind the scenes. Now you might be wondering, why tell these stories at all? Why not just let the past be the past and focus on the talent these individuals brought to the world? Because understanding history, especially the uncomfortable parts, helps us build a better future. By examining how power was abused in the past, we become more capable of identifying and stopping it today. By confronting the sins of so-called heroes, we ensure that future icons are held to higher standards. And by giving voice to the victims who were silenced, we bring justice, however delayed, into the light. This isn't about canceling anyone. It's about accountability. It's about recognizing that being talented or famous doesn't make someone good, kind, or moral. And it's about shifting our culture so that success is no longer used as a shield to deflect consequences. We also need to consider what we, as fans and consumers of entertainment, have contributed to this ecosystem. Because let's be honest, sometimes we put these people on pedestals. We worship them, defend them, and refuse to believe they could do any wrong. And that kind of blind loyalty can be dangerous. It allows monsters to hide in plain sight, cloaked in our admiration. So maybe the real lesson here isn't just never meet your heroes. Maybe it's stop making heroes out of people you don't actually know. Appreciate their work, sure. Celebrate their art, absolutely. But don't confuse on-screen charm with off-screen character. Don't assume that because someone moved you with a performance, they're someone you should model your life after. And for those in Hollywood today, the actors, directors, producers, and executives, these stories should be a wake-up call. The world is watching now. The systems of silence and complicity are cracking, And while talent can still take you far, integrity will determine how long you stay. Because at the end of the day, history remembers more than just who stood in the spotlight. It also remembers how they treated the people standing just outside of it. It's a cautionary tale, really. How someone like Mickey Rooney, who began life with boundless promise and star power, ultimately became consumed by the very industry that made him famous. His trajectory is a grim reminder of what happens when someone is handed the world before they're equipped to understand how to handle it. He was a child when Hollywood claimed him, and for many, that's where he emotionally remained. A boy with too much power, too little guidance, and an unchecked sense of invincibility. Fame insulated him. Every mistake, every misstep was brushed aside because of what he brought to the screen. But when the cameras stopped rolling, the chaos in his personal life often played out like a darker, more tragic performance. Rooney's downfall was not sudden, nor was it shocking to those who truly knew him. It came in fragments: a broken marriage here, a lost fortune there, a reputation that steadily eroded as years passed. He tried repeatedly to reclaim his former glory, but Hollywood had changed, and so had the public's appetite for redemption stories. Even late in life, he clung to the spotlight, desperate for one last act that would restore his name. But legacy is a complicated thing. For some, it's about enduring artistry. For others, it's about reckoning with all that was buried to preserve a facade. And that's the real thread tying together every story we've told in this video. It's not just about the individual darkness of these stars. It's about the system that let them act this way, time and again, because it was more profitable to ignore it. The studios, the publicists, the press, the fan clubs, they all had a hand in enabling this culture. In many cases, the bad behavior of stars was rebranded as charisma, eccentricity, or part of the process. That narrative worked because it was convenient. The truth would have cost money, careers, and box office momentum. This wasn't just a few bad apples. It was a rotten orchard hidden beneath layers of glitz and glamour. The golden age of Hollywood wasn't really golden. It was polished on the surface, but deeply flawed underneath. And the more you peel back the stories, the more you realize how many lives were upended behind the curtain of movie magic. How many co-stars, assistants, extras, and even fans were mistreated, manipulated, or simply discarded to protect the mythology of these iconic figures. And to be fair, not every star was evil or manipulative. There were plenty who did try to do right, who used their platform to speak out, even when it cost them. But in the grand scheme of things, those were the exceptions. The rule was silence. And silence, when paired with power, can become dangerous. What's even more unsettling is how closely this still mirrors the entertainment world today. We'd like to believe we've moved past all this, that we've created an industry that values integrity, accountability, and transparency. But time and time again, we see echoes of the past bleeding into the present. Modern stars still fall victim to the same pitfalls: unchecked egos, toxic environments, enablers posing as supporters, and an industry still sometimes more concerned with optics than truth. The difference now is that the public has more power. Social media, independent journalism, and survivor-led movements have changed the game. People can speak out without being entirely silenced. Audiences are starting to demand more from the people they admire, and rightly so, because talent should never excuse cruelty, and brilliance should never shield abuse. So when we look back at these tales from old Hollywood, it's not about tearing down legends for the sake of scandal. It's about understanding the full scope of history, not just the highlight reel. It's about holding truth and complexity in the same hand. These actors could be both talented and terrible, beloved and abusive, inspirational and irresponsible. That duality doesn't erase their achievements, but it absolutely reframes them. And it should make us pause the next time we feel the urge to idolize someone simply because they entertained us. That's the real lesson here. Admire the work, sure, but question the legacy. Don't mistake fame for goodness or charisma for character. Because when you peel away the makeup, the awards, and the carefully staged interviews, what's left is a person. And as we've seen, sometimes that person is far from the image projected on screen. In the end, the people who worked beside these stars, who endured their tempers, their addictions, their abuses, often go unnamed in history books. But they are just as much a part of the Hollywood story as the faces we recognize. They remind us that greatness, when built on the backs of others, often comes at a price too high to be worth paying. So maybe never meet your heroes isn't just a warning, it's a challenge to rethink who we celebrate, why we celebrate them, and what we choose to overlook in the process. Because a spotlight might reveal greatness, but it also casts some long, dark shadows. And that's all from the golden age of Hollywood and the actors who might have seemed like the greatest of us on screen, but were actually quite evil when the camera was off them. Does their actions remind you of certain people in the modern age of Hollywood? Which of these actors did you feel was the evilest of all? Or do you know another golden age actor who should have been on our list? Let us know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe and we'll see you next time on the channel.